Where'd that come from?
That came from over Alex. Like that's an import. That's flint had to be imported.
That looks like our blade. That looks like the colour of our blade. You know, the nice blade.
Oh yeah.
A nice blade. A nice blade is a deep red blade. That's really something.
Yeah,
Beaubec, it sounds more romantic. So we're delighted to be starting year 3 with the financial help from FBD, and we thought we'd better get a celebrity to do the first sod this year. So we got the nearest person to Stone Age man. In the neighbourhood, and that's Barney, our good neighbour, who is in his 90s, we'll say. 91 gone. So, and Barney, well, we also discommoded Barney by taking his cattle out of this field. So because that was the case, we thought we better pay him back some way. So Barney is here to turn the first sod for us today. You're more than welcome, Barney.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I feel that Queen Elizabeth, believe it or not. But when I lift up this sod, it will not be a bottle of brandy that I'll be breaking in the barrel of the Royal Yacht. All right.
Geraldine Stout, we're here at Beaubec, just outside Drogheda, and you've been excavating here with your husband Matt for the past 3 summers.
absolutely.
Tell us why you came here in the first place and what there is here.
Yeah, well, I after this really started after a conversation with a local landowner, John McCullen, and he had a family tradition that there was a monastery on this site. His great aunt used to always talk about the monastery at Beaubec.
Right.
Okay, so I did a little bit of investigation and I identified historical reference to a Cistercian foundation here on the site. And I found that out that in 1205 the local lords, the great de Lacys, granted de Beaubec in Normandy lands here in Baymore. And on this site a small community of monks from de Beaubec would have established a farm here.
A farm.
A farm.
What was the?
Yeah.
What intrigues me is that this was independent of Mellifont Abbey.
Yes, that's very exceptional about this, that they considered, well, this is the Boyne Valley, of course.
Yeah.
They considered worthwhile coming here, farming land here, and then sending all the produce back to their mother house in Normandy. How this area was so rich, obviously, it had such a name for rich produce,
Yeah.
that they thought it was worthwhile to come all the way from Normandy to here, establish a farm, and then send the agricultural produce back to their house in
That's
de
really
Beaubec.
incredible.
It is incredible.
And is there any evidence that they had any links with Mellifont?
Absolutely. We come across later references to priors from Beaubec actually being part of being monks in Mellifont in later times, and also in Bective as well.
Yeah.
But so there would have been some kind of I assume communication between them.
Yeah.
But this is very much their farm, and this is what we often refer to as an alien farm.
Yes.
Because they really kept themselves. And like one of the things we found when we came here is that we uncovered this very deep ditch or a moat, okay, that went around the site here. And we think the first thing they did when the monks came here is actually they dug this moat, this water-filled moat, to define their farm, okay?
Yeah.
And within this moat, they built their main residence and agricultural buildings here, and they were all contained within this water-filled moat.
And was that a defensive structure, was it?
Well, no, I think it was all about supplying water supply. It was all about water supply for the residents and also water supply for flushing their toilets, because we found the medieval toilet last year.
Right.
On the site.
A medieval toilet.
A medieval
and how
toilet.
does that work? Like pretty much like
Very
a modern
well,
toilet.
very well. But
Yeah.
basically, there would have been a regular. This moat would have been fed by a spring, okay, and
okay.
there would have been a regular flow of water. So the toilets are in the bottom of a tower over there, and so the water would be flowing underneath the tower and flushing it out.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was a very productive place for people to dig. As a
Yes,
toilet,
yeah.
medieval toilet.
And so when
Yeah.
you came here in the
Yeah.
first season, was it in the first season you also found evidence of older activity on the site? Or was that last
Yes.
year?
Well, no. You see, the first season, we found the foundations of a demolished residence. That would have been where they lived, the refectory and dormitory, just over there. But in the centre of that chamber, we found this very deep pit, and of course, I kept thinking this is medieval, so that must be a big pit to hold up the roof, a big timber for the roof.
Yeah.
But then the second season we came along, we found further pits, and we realised they were forming an arc. And then we got some charcoal in the base of one of the pits, and it was dated to 2465 BC.
Wow.
So we were dealing with prehistoric on site. But this is amazing, and now we think we have the remains of a tomb on the other end of the site as well.
Really?
Yeah, we found the socket for a curbstone and loads of flint. Like this is a flint that came up today, and this is flint. This is flint that had to be imported. It's a beautiful red saw flint.
It's not local, is it?
It's not local.
Yeah.
So they're bringing flint in. So, but this is typical of any Irish monument. You go to it thinking you're going to find post-medieval, and you go down medieval, you go down again prehistoric. You've got that time depth in Ireland that you get in all sites.
Yeah.
So we thought we were digging a medieval Cistercian farm, and we find we have a prehistoric tomb and a late Neolithic pit circle all in the one area.
As you said recently, you can't get away from the Neolithic.
Yeah,
it follows you everywhere. But come here.
No, it's great. It's great.
You have a particular interest in the Cistercian.
I am,
don't
because
you?
I am particularly.
Where did that emanate from?
That goes back to when I was a student. I worked in the Boyne Valley on the North excavations, and Tara Columkill, who was a Cistercian monk and historian at the time, came to the students and told us about. He presented this wonderful picture of monks, lay brethren working on farms in Ireland in medieval times. And I always said I'd do something about granges and this whole way of farming, but then I had to wait 30 years later before I did any work on it.
Yeah.
So for the last about 10 years, I've been identifying the Cistercian farms and their estates, mapping their estates. And this is a brilliant opportunity to actually look in microcosm at one particular grange farm and see how it functions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the first 2 seasons, what we did was we excavated the remains of their main residential block. So over there we have a 2-storey building with a tower that runs off it, and that's the tower that contained the medieval toilets. And what we have over here then are the foundation walls of that main chamber, because what happened in the 18th century, an avenue ran through here and levelled the walls, most of the walls of the residence. So we're only getting them, as you can see, in the lower foundations.
Yeah.
So then we can get the ground plan of that main residential building from there. And in this building we found local Drogheda pottery, French pottery, nails, a whole range, animal bones. So we were able to reconstruct the diet of the monks who lived in this building.
So can you tell us what kind of stuff the Cistercian monks lived on?
Well, the
Did
toilets,
they have the high life?
The toilets were brilliant for stuff. We found lots of evidence of wheat, oats and barley, okay? So they were probably eating their porridge in the morning, but we found strawberry seeds, raspberry seeds, figs, grapes. The figs and grapes were import, I'd say, from the mother house.
Yeah.
Plums, cherries. So we were able to then see that there would have been gardens here, fruit gardens, and then orchards as well.
Wow. So they were getting their 5 a day.
They're getting 5 a day. But one of the things they're getting very few animal bones, because the Cistercians had a very strict diet and they weren't supposed to eat the meat of 4-legged animals.
Oh, right.
Although when we dug Bective, they were more. These are French monks who obviously kept to the statutes, but because over in Bective we got truckloads of bones, so they were on their joints, whatever. They
couldn't avoid it.
They were eating lots of meat. But here they're French and they're different. So what we have uncovered here is the complete ground plan of a barn that would have been used to house the crops that were harvested on the lands of the Cistercians. And this is a really exceptional monument, because this is actually, it's very rare to find a Cistercian barn in Ireland. I only know of one in Anamult in Kilkenny. We got the timber one in Bective, and there's a collapsed one in Ballinlig and Sligo. So this is really, so it's a massive building, medieval building, with walls like 150 metres wide. Like,
they didn't do things by halves back then, did they?
I know, and one of the things, we had a barn man here yesterday, Mr. Barn expert, and he was able to look at the walls, and he was able to tell us that it would have had a particular type of roof, what we call a crook roof. Because the walls, if you notice over there on the far side, they go along like this, down, up, down, up. And where they go down is where the timber for the roof went into the wall.
I see.
So we have this lovely crook shape. So we now can imagine what the roof was like here.
Fantastic.
And like, it was just a massive building. And they would have harvested the corn, brought the sheaves into the barn here. We have a threshing floor on the far end of the barn, where they would have flailed the corn and the ears of corn, and then they would have dried them in the kiln down this end.
Yeah. The kiln is gone now, of course,
gone, yeah.
But you've very, very carefully recorded it.
Oh yeah, it's been everything is recorded by record, preserved by record.
Yeah.
So everything is drawn in measured drawings, every phase, and photographed, and we have 3D images of every single layer, everything we take out.
Brilliant.
But what we surprise, when we excavated the kiln, we found that it was actually sitting on, we believe to be a socket for a prehistoric curbstone, because we're finding loads of flint in this area here.
Wow. And do you think the monks, when they came here, would have known that they were building on top of an older site?
Yeah, well, this is
hard not to know.
You know
I
what's
suppose.
amazing, Anthony, is there's an exact analogy for this in Newgrange, because in O'Kelly, when he excavated outside the Newgrange, all the satellite tombs, small tombs, were damaged, were knocked, the stones shattered, and there's all this ridge and furrow going across. So it was actually the monks, the Cistercian monks from Mellifont, destroyed the smaller tombs at Newgrange. And we have exact parallels for this, which is quite amazing.
That's incredible,
because
isn't
there's
it?
a crisscross of these ridge and furrow on this site now, before they built the barn.
Yeah.
So they actually leveled, and we're finding bits of curbstones all through the deposits.
Very
this
interesting.
is a curbstone here. You see, this is a piece of grey wacky here,
Yeah.
similar to the curbs in Nouth. And we're finding bits of those curbstones all over the site.
Fascinating.
And then with the flint is turning
and
up
of
in the
course,
same
I
area.
mean, we're not far from Brunabonia.
No,
it's literally
no.
only about 7 miles or 6 miles as the crow flies from here.
So what we have, we've a late Neolithic pit circle, and we have a prehistoric tomb.
Wow, fantastic stuff. Tell me about the size of the community that would have lived here.
Yeah.
Do we know anything about how many
Yeah.
monks there were? Was it 8
Well,
or 10
I
or
can
20?
answer that question this year. You asked me that last year, Anthony. We one of the things we can show, every monk got a loaf of bread, okay? Every day, one loaf of bread.
Right.
And we have evidence for an oven here, okay? The kiln started as a kiln, then was turned into a bread oven. And so we got one of the young lads here to make clay bread loaves. And we put it in the inside of the thing, and we came up with a figure of 45 loaves.
45?
So now,
That
if anybody
many.
asks me a question, 45 monks.
You think you
on
have
it.
the answer?
Yeah.
And would they all have lived in the tower?
We see some of them might have lived
In buildings?
Yeah, it's
outside of the-
it's quite a large building. When we've been working on reconstructing the it's quite a large building, but some of them might have been just lived locally, you know.
Yeah.
Because in many cases in these farms, you have a combination of local lay tenants and the monks working together.
So they weren't all
They
ecclesiastics?
weren't all ecclesiastics. Yeah.
And they wouldn't have engaged in the normal activities of a monastery. Say, for instance, there was no scriptorium.
Yeah.
Scriptorium
well,
here or
lay
anything like
brothers
that.
did. They were involved in the day-to-day life of the monastery, but they only had 1 year's training. The lay brethren only had 1 year's training, where the choir monks would have had 3 to 4 years training.
Right, yeah.
And they were taught 3 prayers, like including the Pater Noster. So they weren't taught to read Latin or French or anything. So they actually had there's a manual called the Usus Conversium, So there's a manual for the use of lay brethren in monasteries, which the Cistercians came up with, and it actually lists what days they take off in the year, and what feast days they don't have to work, and it's amazing. Uses Conversium.
So at that stage, things were very well developed from the point of view, and especially when you consider this is a community that was a long way from home.
Yeah,
this was home away from home.
This was very much away from home.
Tell us about the size of the building. Yeah. What are the dimensions?
Yeah, well, it's about
the barn.
It's about 25 metres long by 8 metres wide, and that I was comparing that with statistics of Cistercian barns in England and Wales, and it would fit into the kind of fall into the middle range of barns. There's a lot more work done in England.
It would require quite a large roof then, wouldn't it? Like, that's a big building.
That is a big. Now we're working on the reconstructions. Actually, if you have a chance to have a look at the reconstructions, we can maybe go talk to Elizabeth.
Yeah.
But we have reconstructions of it. But but we've a lot of comparative material with England, with Britain. You see, these tide barns turn up regularly on Cistercian granges in England and Wales. But they're so unusual that we don't get them in Ireland.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of comparative material. We can now start looking at books on tide barns in England.
Yeah.
For comparison.
You're coming close to the end of not just the third year, but the conclusion of excavations. I suppose that brings mixed feelings.
The end of the beginning.
Well, you only have to do all the paperwork now.
Yeah, exactly.
How does it feel to be at that point?
I'm absolutely thrilled because we got a hell of a lot more out of this site than I expected. I think we can actually. I can create a narrative based on what we found, and that we've the residential block and we have the barn where they stored their wheat, oats, and barley, whatever, and their peas. So we can, we have a very, we can tell a story of the community here, I think.
Yeah. And when can we expect publication?
Next year. We have at the moment.
You guys don't sit in your hands.
No, at the moment in the office, we have somebody packing up all the metalwork to send to a girl, a specialist in Waterford, who does all the metalwork. Roseanne is looking at all the pottery. She will be producing that report very soon because she's been working on site. Penny Johnson has processed all her samples, and so she will be able to give us an environmental report within a couple of months of the site.
Fantastic.
So, and then the rest of it, all the dirty feature sheets and going through those and the drawings is up to me. So but it's brilliant. I love that. I love looking at all the threads and bringing them together and to create a narrative of this site.
You're really like a detective, I suppose.
Totally.
And it's quite forensic, isn't it?
Every bit of information is important, and every bit of information that people observe is important.
Yeah. So when you started here, on the first day, did you have any expectations, or what was your wish?
We had a serious doubts. Really, we did, because the only thing that the building itself, it doesn't look that medieval. It's not a castle. It has a window, but the window could have been put. It has this beautiful medieval window, but that could have been put in later. At the time we were looking to get money to go back to Newgrange Farm. This was just something. This was just sort of a commitment that Geraldine had made to John that she would have a look, but we weren't sure it'd be anything because the feeling. Well, I always got the feeling that it was 17th century, that it was all part of the beginnings of the house and that.
Yeah.
But the very first day we found a piece of French medieval pottery, and then last year when we dug the latrine out, that was full of 14th century Drogheda pottery. So we know from the records that it began before 1205, and now we know that it was sort of abandoned, and the loos were let to block up, and the moat was allowed to fill up in the middle of the 14th century, and that ties in with the famine. So we went from not being sure it was a medieval site at all, and that includes Geraldine. Now this is not just me. She was not sure about it at all, because it doesn't conform to anything really, except for maybe a medieval hall house, which is actually what now we think it is. But anyway, so then getting the latrine and sort of understanding the site, and then now getting the barn, it's just you know, I mean, now it's going to become. I don't know if Geraldine told you this or not, but now it's going to become a listed monument, and it'll be preserved on the ground plan of it will be preserved on the site. The tower might be turned into a little exhibition area, and you know that's all CMF funding. You know that's the big deal. That's kind of the COVID dividend now, because there's money the government is putting money into trying to present monuments that are in private property, because most of monuments in Ireland are in private ownership.
Course, yeah.
So now the money is this is the first time they've ever had a chunk of money that they're giving to the farmers to develop their sites.
Yeah.
And so we went from zero to hero. We went from not knowing it was medieval at all to now being certain of its date and its purpose. And then it'll be the first site we ever dug that will be preserved, because most of the time you just fill it back in again, and that's kind of sad. Yeah. Like if you look at Bective, we found a little barn in Bective, but if you go back to Bective now, you can't see where we dug even.
Right.
It's just gets all grassed over again. You can't if it wasn't for the tree in Newgrange Farm, you wouldn't see where we did our cutting.
Yeah.
That's all been ploughed away now. So
yeah, so that's great.
This is kind of, well, it's kind of a little legacy project. And this is you were talking about husband and wife working. Well, my brother used to always call us the Leakies of Ireland, because that's the great husband and wife team were the Leakies. And then their son is the man who discovered Lucy. Did you ever read that book? One of the oldest fossils ever, the oldest people ever found was not found by Louis Leakey, but by his son Richard.
Right.
And so it's a wonderful book about their work in Aldevai Gorge and what's that, Kenya, I think.
That's the one I don't have in my library. I
got to see the Leakeys speak. I got to see Louis Leakey speak. He was like a superstar. He filled an entire basketball arena in the local university when I was a kid, and he did not dumb it down either. He talked about teeth for an hour. It was tough going for a kid, I was 10 years old or something, but he was a star in National Geographic, and it was just fantastic just to see him, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Leakeys of Ireland, that's what my brother used to call us as a husband and wife team, you know. But Geraldine and I, we've been working together. Well, we met at Nouth, of course, where love stories begin, working for George Ogan, and then we've been working together and doing archaeological stuff since 78, I guess. You
seem to work well together. Does it present any challenges?
Sometimes we do. Sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. And it but we survive, and I think we're going to survive. This excavation has been particularly busy and challenging, but yeah, we'll survive. Yeah, it's great. But we also have a different range of skills, you know, because I can do drawings and book production, and you know, and Geraldine a qualified archaeologist. I'm a qualified historical geographer, which is different, you know. So
yeah.
But I worked for years. We both worked for years. I suppose, I don't know if that's a good foundation for a relationship or not, but we've been we met on an archaeological site, and we're still on archaeological sites 46 years
careful
later. Yeah.
Now
46. Yeah, we're married 41. We're married 40 years.
Wow.
So it's 46 years we've been digging together. Yeah.
Fantastic.
That's a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. You don't look old enough to be married 40 years, if I might say.
There you go. Yeah, we're 40 years last year.
Brilliant.
Couldn't celebrate because of the
COVID.
But
Yeah.
Saved it.
Was there is there a particular find or aspect of this excavation that really excited you? Is there anything that stands out for you as a moment when you said, "Oh, fantastic," and you jumped in the air? Or...
Well, there's been a lot of those, actually. That plague pot. Was Geraldine talking about that a lot? Was she? Well, the plague pot was kind of the key to the site in one way, because before we found this pot, we were always thinking about the origins of the site. But when we found this very peculiar pot, we began to thinking about the end of the site, and that all fitted well with the whole COVID thing too, because it was the most. Well, I wasn't digging it. Aidan and Mick from Fingal were digging it. But even when it was coming up, it was the most unusual pot anybody had ever seen.
Yeah.
And when I put it together, we brought it back. It was all clearly one pot smashed together, but it was a weird looking thing. And when I put it together in the house, Geraldine said, "Get that out of the house. That gives me the creeps." And then, Kieran Campbell says, "Well, it's a type of pot known as a fuming pot." And then you read about the only thing they knew to do against the Black Death was the only thing that the doctors of the day knew to do was to burn herbs and woods and spices to freshen the air. Now, obviously, it didn't work. It had nothing. It was in no way help people from getting the plague or dying from the plague. But I suppose maybe it made the process a little bit more pleasant before they died. But that was the only thing. So that's kind of a eureka moment that brings you into a whole different direction, because then you read there's a poem, and all the internet is such a fantastic source. So there's a poem written in I don't know if it's Italian or Latin, but it's from the plague, by a man criticizing the doctors and how useless they were during the plague in Italy, and it talks about burning wood and spices, and so I think that pot was, I suppose, one of the eureka moments, because finding a coin is great. That coin we found was terrific, of Edward III. When I first saw it, for some reason I knew. I said that's Edward I. I must have seen that in the Trim report or something, but it wasn't Edward. It was Edward III. But still, that's 1360, and that again provides us with a nice sort of date. Coins are great, but I think that very strange looking pot was I think the moment. But did you hear about our Lansdale axe?
Oh, this is the greenish axe head.
Yeah,
tell us about it.
Well, the prehistory of this site is kind of a sideshow. We're not that's not what we're here interested in. But we've got the pit circle, which we got dated to 2333 BC, which is all part of Dronehenge. It's exactly the same time. It's part of that late Neolithic post passage tomb stuff that's going on here.
Yeah.
But there's stone on. There's a big lump of grey wacky, which is the stone they used to build passage tombs, and Geraldine's always called it her passage tomb, even though we don't have any evidence for it yet. But then we found a beautiful polished stone axe, and that is it's proper Neolithic stone axe, not a late Neolithic, but a proper thing. And that's Cumbria, and they would sell. There was a trade in axes. You find these axes all over Britain and Ireland, and then up the crowd up in the north in Sleebulia, they sold their axes into Britain. So there's a busy trade of these stone axes. And it's just wonderful to find that. That's better than anything we found at Newgrange Farm. We dug there for 4 weeks and didn't find anything.
Which is a late Neolithic site.
Yeah. And we found some great big pits which we were able to date. We got another date. Did you know that? Since.
Oh, right.
This is all part of the technology of the thing, which I don't necessarily have to understand. But we got one date, which was a classic late Neolithic date. And then, Steve Davis was interested in dating that big. We couldn't get a date for the big pit because all the bone had all the collagen had washed out. So he used another technique to get dating material and got another date. It's slightly earlier, but still the same.
Brilliant.
So that's.
But this site has been much more productive than.
Well, from the point of view of finds, that's one of the great things. But actually, from the point of view of prehistoric finds, which is peculiar.
Yeah.
But it's just. I mean, that's one of the great things about a medieval site, because we can if you look at the boxes full of pottery, and Roseanne Meenan will take that, and there's French pottery, there's pottery from Chester, we've got English pottery here, and it's all tells you the story. In fact, that's actually I'm just thinking of that now, because this began as a French monastery, and then it was taken over by an English monastery, and that's so you got the French pottery, you've got the English pottery, you've got the history of the site in its artifacts, if you like.
Brilliant.
I guess that's what archaeology is trying to find the physical remains of, especially when you're finding the physical remains of the history of the site, and when you're dealing in historic archaeology, you have all the records, and the finds kind of drive you along, and when you're digging on an historic site, the artifacts that you find lead you in different directions. Like I say, the plague pot, they put us in the direction of reading more about the plague, and just as what I always regarded was a throwaway remark in the annals of Father Clin, who wrote about the plague in Kilkenny and died of the plague, and he has it's well known because he says that he's going to leave a blank page in case any of the sons of Adam survive to keep the document going, and then that's just the blank page. He dies and there's no more written, and he assumed that this was the end of the world.
He thinks that maybe everyone's
going to die.
Wow.
And he's our source for all the early deaths in Drogheda, because they're the same order, so they're dropping like flies everywhere. And so this is a source that anyone teaching about the medieval would know, because it's kind of it brings the plague alive, because it's a first-hand account. But then a couple pages before he talks about the end, he says that the price of spices has skyrocketed, and I would have read that many times and never it would have no meaning to me whatsoever. But when you find the plague pot, the fuming pot, all of a sudden you realize that everybody is trying to get scented woods and spices to what they hoped would ward off the famine. It's just not the famine, the plague. Such an air of desperation. And I think that's these guys. They died. Oh, that's another thing. Sorry, this is probably going on too long. But another thing is, Geraldine writes about the monks dying in 1348, and that's in her first article on Beaubec. But now, in 1348, that didn't ring any alarm bells. But that's the plague year.
Yeah.
And then the Prestons come in and try to take over the land because the place has been abandoned. And the monastery in England has to spend the next 30 years in court trying to get the land back, and it's all that's all come from one pot.
Wow,
that direction of research and understanding comes from one discovery. So I think that's kind of the Eureka moment for here.
Yeah, brilliant.
So
now that you're nearly at the end of not just the third season of excavations, but in fact you're winding down the whole excavation in the next day or two.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
Oh, well, next July comes, it'll be mixed feelings. We'll be thinking, what a relief we're not digging. And then we'll be thinking, what a shame we're not digging, so. Yeah. But it's probably going to be temporary. We 3 or 4 years, we have a huge amount of material. We'll spend a couple of years writing that up, and then we'll hopefully come back. We'll either come back here or hopefully come back somewhere else. However we get the money. But again, because we've been working together in archaeology so long, it's kind of our identity. We like to be able to dig, and we have although it is a challenge, and particularly under COVID conditions, it's a big challenge. But it's great fun.
Yeah,
we had great time. I don't know if you can pan over that direction. I don't know if your camera pans or not, but those are all volunteers.
That's a substantial team.
That's a substantial team.
Yeah.
35 on the very first day.
Wow.
And all volunteers, all very keen and and they bring the skills they bring with them. There's photographers there, and geographers, and just some very strong people if we need to shift big rocks, and it's just amazing. And that's all volunteer work, and people like to. I think the other thing is we don't use machines, so we don't have to have the whole high vis steel toes.
Yeah.
And means we've always tried to keep it family friendly. I think that's part of it too.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, it's great. You've visitors nearly every day. You always have had on your digs.
It's incredible. Newgrange was like if you're in the Boyne Valley, it's like you're on the M1. You know, it's the number of visitors there was just incredible. But we have, I'll tell you, 1, 2, 3. We've had a dozen visitors here today.
Just today.
Just today in a field in County Meath.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
People, the papers and things, and people know, and some people have been following the blog, and they come out. It's great.
Brilliant. Now, while I was talking to Matthew and Geraldine, they kept referring to John, and John is John McCullen, who is the landowner here. John, long before Matt and Geraldine began their excavations here, you already had an inkling that this was an important place. How was that so?
Well, my aunt, who was a single lady, Aunt Mary, used to come and stay with us for periods of 6 weeks or 2 months. And when we'd see her coming, we'd say, hooray, hooray, because she'd be bringing things. And then when she'd be gone, we'd say, goodbye, we're glad to see the back of you. She was a historical fanatic, and she had all these stories about old things. And one of the big ones that she played was never to do anything destructive to the stone building in the field, because she said it was a holy place. And Mass had been said there, God knows when. And then she would regale us with the story of the man, Mr. Draycott, who got similar property at Donnycarney, knocked down the monastic buildings to build his big house, and as a result of that his wife fell down the stairs, his 2 children were burnt in a fire, and he suffered all kinds of tragedies. So there was the penalty was there. If you messed with holy buildings, you got diatribe and pain as a result.
Yeah.
So partly because of that, and I suppose partly because there was something unusual about the building, I never disturbed it.
That's this building here behind
there.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in 3 years ago now, isn't it?
Well, it actually the
2 years
if you
ago.
like, would have started some years before that, because we did geophysics, on the field.
Yeah.
To see what was there, and Geraldine was keen to do something, and so was I, because it was curious. And any references I could find were to some kind of an establishment in Beaubec in the early 1200s. So we decided to see what was there, and fortunately we got a great team of people, and then we got the money from FBD, which made it happen.
Yeah.
So it's turned out far more than we ever expected.
Yes. Yeah. And you're obviously delighted that the proof has now been found about what Aunt Mary was telling you years ago.
Mary's story, but then she had never said anything about Neolithic foundations.
Yeah.
So we're getting bonuses every day that we go out.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's great, and there's a great atmosphere on the dig, I have to say.
Yeah, they have a great team,
Which is
haven't
a
they?
credit to the Stouts, because they've been very good.
Yeah.
I find in people gravitate towards here, and they're all volunteers by and large, and they've done marvellous work.
Yeah.
And it's not often we give compliments to the Dubs, but we got 3 or 4 kind of leftovers from Fingal a couple of years ago, and they've been absolutely marvellous. Kind of mature gentlemen who were used to doing what they were doing, had nothing to do because there was nothing happening in Fingal, and decided to come down here and give us a hand.
Yeah.
And they've been absolutely magnificent.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Of course, you're interested. You're a historian. I mean, you've written quite a lot about history yourself.
In the background, Anthony, I would be interested in history.
Yeah.
And I suppose, and finding out what did happen, and more so to ordinary folk, as the socialist politicians would say, than to lords and ladies, because the lords and ladies are well catalogued.
Yeah.
The other people, there's little enough known about them, or how they lived or what they did.
Yeah.
And certainly we're finding a lot of stuff about diet here, and crops, and farming related things as well as everything else.
Yeah, because you're a farmer too, or
yeah.
Retired farmer?
Well, no, farmers never retire. I'm afraid they don't.
Penny Johnston, you're the environmental archaeologist here at the Beaubec dig. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
So when we dig archaeological sites, we take samples, sometimes of the soil that's being excavated, and I process the soil, float it, sieve it, and I look for environmental remains in the soil. So at the moment I'm looking at lots of burnt plant remains from the kiln that was excavated down on the site, and just looking at the remains that come through, looking at them and identifying them on my microscope.
And what sort of stuff is showing up?
So lots of different things. A lot of it is fuel. So there's lots of charcoal and little twigs and bits of briars and that kind of thing, and then lots of cereal grains as well that are mixed in with the fuel. So there's mixed. These would have been the grains that were dried in the kiln. That the kiln was, set fire to in order to dry these grains. So bread wheat, a lot of bread wheat, and there's quite a bit of barley and some rye here as well. And there's a little bit of oat, but I think the oat is probably a weed of the main crop. So lots of different things.
This stuff survives the fire, does it?
Well, yeah, it actually is preserved because of the fire, because the fire if it doesn't burn away to ash, it converts the organic material to inert carbon that survives in the soil. So carbon is chemically inert in the soil. It doesn't degrade any further than it's already. It can degrade by being broken mechanically, but not chemically. Yeah. So it's preserved in the soil.
And how much material have you been dealing with over the past 4 weeks? Are we talking wheelbarrows full?
No, but they are very tiny.
Yeah.
Like, I think this is a lot, so I can show you. These are all my samples that I have gathered. All the numbers of materials.
Oh wow.
And some, not all of those are full, but some of them would be full like this. This is very dirty, I'm afraid, but full of charred grain. So.
And that, of course, tells us a little bit about the diet.
And maybe they're what crops they were exporting as well. But they're probably exporting from here to France. So, yeah.
So this is our finding. We got this is a reconstruction of the kiln, of the building, I should say. We've got the kiln. We have the sheaves of corn that would have been stored. We have the drain, threshing floor.
Wow.
Evidence for dried cereal, for the peas and the beans. We've got you get a sense of the whole how the barn was used.
Fantastic.
Isn't that class?
And then
and even a couple of monks as well.
Yeah. I just got
let me see. Here, I could show you.
You put it white, and look at you tattered.
So here, I can show you also how you can.
Tattered is thing.
Oh yeah. So
great.
We zoom in on our.
I was telling
them
the lay brother. Anytime you see a lay brother being on record, he always has his habit is always torn and stuff.
Oh, I see.
A little muddy.
A bit muddy, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then a fun feature of this is that we can switch the opacity of the building itself, so we can either see more of the excavation behind
Fabulous.
it.
That's
But
really
one thing I was saying, just showing she now becomes a ghost. There, and then today becomes a ghost. See the way, she's a ghost. So she's like a ghost from the future, and they're there.
Amazing.
Isn't it?
Isn't it fabulous?
Thank you.
And you do all this on an iPad?
Yep, just drew it by hand.
Wow. And what's the software?
It's called Procreate. It's not any sort of 3D modeling thing, it's just perspective drawing.
Yeah. And is this what you specialise in?
No, I'm an engineer.
Is this like a sideline?
Yeah, I do illustration on the side as I'll draw like birthday presents and things like that. Usually drawing like people with their moms or something like that.
Yeah.
So
and
drawing
Are
structures.
you studying archaeology, are you?
No, I'm a civil engineer.
Wow. There's an amazing amount of talent and, different capabilities on this dig, People from all walks of life. What brought you here?
Through Notre Dame. They helped set this up for me. I was here to dig, actually, so this was a fun surprise, a new task to do while I was working here. I mean, I'm not pretending to be an expert on medieval structures in the slightest, but she just keeps bringing in all these experts, and so their input keeps shaping the drawing every day.
Yeah. But it's brilliant. It's brilliant to see, to get an idea what it might have looked like. Because it is, in fairness, when you're looking at the the remnants. It's hard to picture it in your mind's eye, you know.
John said he's always been asked when people come down to that building, why do they bother putting a buttress there when there's nothing left? You know, they don't see the other building.
Yeah.
So you have to. But like all that you see there is based on the facts from the excavation.
Yes.
It's not. There's nothing makey uppy about that.
It's not hypothetical, really.
No, it's totally based.
Even the position of like the
peas and beans. Like we found peas and beans in the samples. We found evidence for dried corn there in that side of the bay of the barn.
Right.
And we found evidence of like the supports have to be like in part of the wall.
You have to see this. It's just class.
Oh wait, should I show him the other one?
Show the index, yeah.
Oh, here. This is fun.
Which one? The index?
No, this is the. Look at this.
Isn't
that?
That's wonderful. It's really class.
Yay!
In the last half hour of the last day of the dig, the youngsters make an exciting discovery.
What's that?
It might be, I'm not sure. The experts will determine what it is.
It's a suzerain.
That's what I thought, but
Class, isn't it?
Don't Matt, your weight now, Matt. I wouldn't be.
Jesus, Julie, I'm not that bad.
I'll say nothing. It's a suzerain.
Oh my! Well, actually, sorry. You know what? Sorry.
Who found it? Tara. Jesus, Tara. 20, 15 minutes. Go. Can I give you? I can't give you a hug, but I wanted to give you a hug.
The only thing I'm worried about is we need John down here to tell us what those stone drains look like.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty damn perfect.
What is it?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Can you take a photograph underneath, Anthony? Can you?
21 inches.
21 inches.
Yeah, exactly.
Narrow for suzerain. Is it dry? Is it walling the same on that side as it is on the other side? Is it?
Yeah.
They're about the same, aren't they?
I think the wall goes deeper though.
Oh wow!
Yeah, like
That's very big.
there's a layer of the silty stuff. but
John,
I
is
feel
that like one of the sewers you used to play in, or is it different?
It's like them, but like, why would there be one there? You know, the two that we have here are both going to the big house. You know, there's no big house down here. Just bend
And
over.
do you see it, Tara? Do you see it going that way and that way? Is it going that way and that way?
Yeah.
For you don't know how would you estimate the distance? Is it like a couple of feet or 2 feet or? Sorry, pressure on your arm, Tara.
Yeah, oh, what's that?
Yeah.
Does it look like Tara?
Yeah, but you can see it very well from this side.
You can see the stones.
That's hilarious. Look at the young ones hogging all the entrance now. Hogging all the limelight.
Where's the Sandy? Okay.
Yeah, but you
You'll like
nearly
it.
want your hand on that.
What?
You'll like it.
Yeah.
Just be careful with your hand.
Well done, you guys, for finding whatever it is.
You get the medal for the day.
And that's what makes me. Where's the fall go, John? Maybe that's what it should be.
it goes at least 21 feet in that direction, which I think is roughly southeast, and at least 21 feet in that direction, which is, I think, northwest roughly.
If you got my arm, you'd get to the end of that.
One broken wrist. I'm okay with that. So look at, folks, I suppose the first thing to do is to say thank you to everybody. You've been magnificent. And the farther on the thing went, I think you've got more magnificent, because you seem to be finding something new every day. And I'm not just talking about the Fingal crowd. There was other people finding things as well. And like, it adds all to the mystique of the whole site. And I think it's a classic kind of a one that 5 minutes from the end, Alex and Lennon and Cara stumbled into a hole over there, and God only knows what it's going to bring. My money is on that it's an actual early 1700s operation coming from the little house that was over there, and I think it might have been a lodge to Pearson's big house, because it's so well built. Now, if anybody's interested afterwards, and it's still not raining, I can bring you up to one of the sewers that we mentioned the other day, which is actually open up there at the back of the house. And you could, Anthony, wherever he is, he could measure with his 21-inch ruler. You know, there he is. You know, just to see how the thing compares to what's over there. But the walls of those ones, the old ones, are extremely well built, and I think that compares to what's over here. So that's the technical lesson done. Thanks very much for your help and your enthusiasm. I'm not finished yet.
We can still applaud.
We had been in the habit of cutting down a beech tree and carving up bits of it to give to Geraldine and Matt. We've run out of beech tree, we need the rest for firewood. So instead of doing that, we decided to get something different this time. So we commissioned Peter, who's a very clever artist, to do a picture of Pearson's house.
Fantastic!
For Geraldine.
Oh, fantastic!
So, Sinead Pearson's house.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, John. So beautiful. Thank you. Wow, it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
Now, you know the way the two of them spark off each other, Matt and Geraldine.
Spark is the word.
Yeah, and
That's the word for it.
she was saying to me the other day
They're
that
using in counselling nowadays.
Just as well, John is a marriage counsellor as well.
she said to me the other day that Matt needed more exercise. So we we did him a picture of the Dutch gardens, which go with the house.
Oh,
so that's the picture of the Dutch gardens. So at least we can.
Am I meant to turn my garden into that?
You're meant to do that.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Okay, Matt. Now,
thank you.
They said
Thank
the
you
Dutch
very
gardens
much.
were long admired. That's what Dalton, the historian, said of the place up there. So,
that's our next
bit
project.
of imagination, and that's the
Thank
next
you.
project
Thank
is
you.
obviously to dig the house.
Yeah.
So, look, thanks very much, folks, for your attention, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your holidays during the year. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks,
Yeah,
John.
very good. Now, Geraldine and I, again, like fighting over everything, the last 4 weeks is fighting out who would say the last few words here. I lost, and so I'm giving the last few words. Grace gave us a lovely dinner the other evening, and I was telling her that one of my favourite stories is the story of stone soup, where the beggar goes into the village and he goes and asks for things from the villagers, and nobody would be helping him, so he sets up a cauldron in the middle of the green and he starts boiling stones. And people get curious and they say, "What are you boiling the stones for?" "I'm making stone soup." And the villagers say, "Well, put some leeks in there, that might improve the soup." Or here's a bit of meat for the soup. The point about it is that Geraldine and myself and the few people that are the few experts that are hired to work on the site could not have done the excavation that we did this year or any years. In fact, can you imagine what it would have been like if without the volunteers on Monday morning 4 weeks ago, if it was just the two of us down here? But in fact, there were 35 people that came down the hill on the first Monday, and that is all of you, all volunteers, all people bringing just this extraordinary range of expertise, all the different variety of experience. Geraldine always likes to say that when you go through the site, it's like listening to different radio channels, all the different types of conversations. We had there was a master class in American politics when Oliver was here. There's all kinds of things, and it's all possible because you came down, and that is an extraordinary thing to give us, I guess, to give society or to archaeology. And of course, then, without going to the nuns in the hall, there were no nuns here, only monks, but the McCullen family, of course, have been such fabulous hosts for this year and for the last 3 years. and our last 3 Julys, and it's just been an extraordinary experience to be able to work with a family that are so enthusiastic. And I think then that's all I'm going to say, because I'm not going to mention all the wonderful people by name, because I leave someone out. Geraldine wants to make a couple of presentations.
Oh,
I think.
yes.
Unless you want to say something else.
No, I just
Geraldine.
want to say over the last, how it's remarkable how we've become a community and we're all taking care of each other. And I think that kind of echoes the community that we're here. When 800 years ago, and we can now we can now tell the story of that small community of French monks that came here like 800 years ago, which is brilliant, isn't it? They're no longer, they'd be famous, that small group of monks that took the journey from Normandy to Baymore. So thank you for helping us tell that story. So we love you all, and you're just fantastic. So thank you. John. We were looking for fig trees, so we got lovely Marie'd olive jars on the site this year. So this is a symbol of Anne and you. One for John and one for Anne. Okay.
Thank you very much.
His and hers olive trees.
So this is to remind us of the Marie'd jars.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, John. Thanks, I don't care on social. Yeah. Now look I swear to God, I've never saw anything like it this year. Have you noticed Grace? She's like the Scarlet
Don't step on that, Geraldine.
She's like the Scarlet Pimpernel on the side. She's everywhere.
Sorry for your trouble.
Grace was and she made such a difference to the site this year. And thank you for organising.
Oh, the PR, Jamie, Mac.
And she's like,
and the beer, most importantly.
She was like Paul McGrath. Paul McGrath used to come in and anytime I'd see somebody coming in there, I'm going, oh God. You see Grace coming out of the bushes and she'd be doing that to get rid of them.
Sweeper, I think is the word.
Sweeper. So this is just a small token of our appreciation. Thank you very much.
That's totally unnecessary, but
thank
you. You're very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent. Where's B?
I think she's got
B.
B is B there. What could we have done without B for the last 3 years? What could we have done? My God, I know she got the award for the archaeologist extraordinaire, and she told me today she's definitely going to be an archaeologist. And I've given you my wish list, haven't I, B? So there you are, B. Yeah, not at all. You're very good. We've had fantastic staff all the year with Penny and them all. I always forget the names, but you all know that I think you're brilliant. And then John and Deirdre this year and everybody. But there's one person who's been always up in the office, has been processing all the finds and away from all the action and quietly making our life, run so well and get everything done. So this is a small token. Since site M. For 3 excavations, Katrina has been doing all this work with our finds and makes it so easy when we come to write it up. So she's always hiding in the site. So I just want to thank the small it's buns for all the rest of you. So and Brona, who's been brilliant this year for taking care of all the visitors and the registration. So give them everybody their t-shirts, Brona.
Oh yeah.